They told my mother she couldn't enter the park on the Sunday after my father's memorial with her cane still tapping the walkway. Name's Calder Riggs. I do internal audits and I live 4 houses down from the gate she wasn't allowed through. The sign was new, HOA, members only bolted on crooked still smelling of spray paint. Her old ID card sat quietly in my jacket, laminated and untouched. Ever seen someone enforce the rules so hard? They forget who helped write them. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that smelled like magnolia and coffee grounds. I had just poured a second cup when my mother appeared at the door in her spring coat cane already in hand. She didn't say anything, just looked at me and tilted her head toward the street. That was her way. We didn't speak much as we walked. Nora Lee had always been a silent walker. The houses in Riverbend Estates looked the same as they did 20 years ago. White fences, trimmed hedges, mailboxes standing like soldiers. But on that particular Sunday something had shifted, if only by a few inches. When we reached the corner where the sidewalk bends into Riverbend Park, I saw a new sign screwed into the iron gate. HOA members only. Access by board. Approval, the paint was still fresh, too bright, too white, and the bolts hadn't even rusted. It leaned slightly to the left like someone had installed it in a hurry. No city emblem, no code reference, just presence. Authority in Helvetica. My mother paused. She looked at the sign for a second, then at the gate, and for a moment she looked like she was trying to remember if this was still the same park she used to push me around in when I was 5. I reached for the latch, but before I could open it we heard the click of heels on concrete. Sibley Marrow. She wore her HOA badge like a sheriff clipped to a pastel blouse, clipboard in one hand and iced coffee in the other. "Good morning," she said, her smile precise. "Sorry, but the park's restricted this morning. Registered members only." I glanced down at my mother's cane, then back at the gate. She's lived here since 1989. Sibley tilted her head all rehearsed grace. "I understand, but according to current HOA guidelines, active membership is required for access to communal spaces. It's part of the update we passed last quarter. You should have received the bulletin." My mother didn't speak. She rarely did when it mattered. Her hand stayed on the curved handle of her cane, her posture straight as a ruler. "What changed?" I asked. Sibley raised her clipboard and tapped a few sheets. "Just doing our job, Mr. Riggs. It's about safety consistency. We've had issues, non-resident gatherings, unregistered guests. I'm sure you understand." I didn't, but I nodded. My mother turned around without a word. The gravel crunched under her heels as she began walking back the way we came. I stayed a second longer, long enough to see the faded chalk drawings still visible on the sidewalk, the ones she'd let neighborhood kids make every Saturday when she used to organize cleanup mornings. "This isn't personal," Sibley added, quieter now. "It's policy." I said nothing, just watched the breeze tug the corner of her clipboard and the cheap sign rattle against the gate. Then I said, "Noted," and followed my mother home. She made tea when we returned, sat by the kitchen window staring out like she was watching something I couldn't see. We didn't talk. I opened my laptop and pulled up the HOA's website, navigated to the Community Updates section. The most recent post was titled Access Adjustments for Communal Facilities, Q1 Implementation. No vote record, no member signatures. That evening, around 6:47 p.m., I received an email. The subject line read, "Compliance concern, unauthorized entry to common space. No greeting. Just a copy of Guideline 4. 2. Perimeter parks," and a bolded reminder that HOA members in good standing were responsible for ensuring all accompanying guests were approved through the portal. Guests? My mother. I stared at the screen for a while, then I clicked print, folded the page, slipped it into the drawer next to the bills. I'd deal with it later, I told myself, but I already knew I wouldn't. Outside, the wind had picked up. The gate at the park rattled again, a few screws already loosening. The email wasn't accusatory. Not overtly. There was no "Mr. Riggs, you violated," or "Please be advised." Instead, it carried the careful detachment of a form written by someone who'd taken a seminar on compliance language. The kind of message that didn't bruise skin but left a dull ache in the ribs for days. I read it 3 times. Then once more. Subject: Compliance concern, unauthorized entry to common space body, in accordance with HOA Bylaw Addendum 4. Access to shared facilities is limited to verified members in good standing. It is the responsibility of each member to ensure proper authorization for all accompanying individuals. Please review the attached image for reference. Below that, no greeting, no signature, no contact name, just a pixelated photo. Grayscale. A camera mounted somewhere above the park gates had caught a vague outline of two figures, one slightly hunched, one walking just behind hand, hovering near the other's shoulder. No color, no context, no dignity. I turned from the screen and stared at the magnifying glass lying next to my coffee mug. It had been a gift from a coworker years ago, meant as a joke during an internal audit that turned up $6 in misplaced reimbursements. For your sleuthing, the note had said. Today, it didn't feel like a joke. I clicked open the HOA bylaws PDF version bookmarked from the last time they raised monthly fees without clear justification. The file was 43 pages long. I started at the table of contents, scanning for anything about park access. Section 4.2 was vague. HOA maintained communal spaces are reserved for verified residential members and guests registered through the digital portal. No mention of how one verifies. No definition of guest. No citation of city statutes. I scrolled further. Section 11 detailed trash bin placement schedules. Section 12 addressed paint color approval. I kept going. Then, buried in Section 14, civic exceptions. I saw it. Veteran-affiliated residents and their immediate dependents may not be denied access to publicly zoned spaces including parks, trails, and recreational grounds regardless of HOA membership status per Tennessee Statute 7-51-205. I blinked. It wasn't highlighted. It wasn't in bold. It was just there, wedged between clauses about emergency snow clearance and fence height restrictions. But it was there. Nora Lee's garden humming reached my ears barely audible. A kind of tuneless tune. She always sang when she pulled weeds as if she were coaxing the soil to cooperate. Her cane leaned against the back porch railing like it belonged there. I opened a new folder on my desktop, named it Park Dispute. Dragged the PDF in, then pulled up the email again and hit print. The pages came out warm. I underlined key phrases with a blue pen, responsibility authorization shared facilities, then stuck a yellow tab beside the clause that mentioned attachments. I placed the blurry photo face up beside the email. The shadows in it could have been anyone, but they weren't. Back at the screen, I opened my Documents folder and scrolled to Taxes. Nora Lee, then Medical 2018, then HOA Receipts. Nothing helpful. Just PDFs, scanned utility bills, and an expired home insurance policy. I leaned back, took a sip of coffee. Cold. Outside, a bird chirped once sharp and fast, then nothing. I reached for a sticky note and wrote in small block letters, Section 14. Civic exceptions. Enforceable, and beneath that, check Nora Lee's papers. A memory nudged its way forward, faint but specific. A blue storage box under her bed, one she hadn't touched in years. Old documents, faded photos. Maybe even her ID from the base. Something in my chest tightened. Not anger, not sadness exactly. A kind of ache that only surfaced when the world tried to tell you your own history no longer mattered. I gathered the pages, stacked them neatly. The highlighted sentence looked strange in blue ink, almost out of place in a document designed to bore the reader into submission. But it was mine now. This wasn't about winning, not yet. It was about clarity. If they wanted policy, I'd give them policy. Word by word, line by line. As I closed the file and turned off the printer, I paused to listen again. Nora Lee had stopped humming. Brantley wasn't surprised when I knocked. He opened the garage door with a tug that felt more like ritual than necessity. "Figured you'd come by," he said without smiling. Then before I could speak, he turned and limped toward the far table where a long cardboard tube already lay waiting. I hadn't told him anything, not really. Just a short text the night before need to talk. It's about the park. That was all, but Brantley Moen had always been a few steps ahead when it came to neighborhood messes. He'd seen 3 HOA presidents rise and fall since retiring as the city's lead zoning inspector. None of them had impressed him much. His garage smelled like truth, if truth came in sawdust oil and ink. The walls were lined with street signs and blueprint rolls yellowed at the edges. Hanging behind the workbench was a row of tools clearly untouched for years. Some still had masking tape with handwritten labels. Gutter, puller, joist, hook, small. Shears, her. I didn't ask who her was. I knew. Brantley pulled the tube open and slid out a rolled sheet the size of a small mattress. As he laid it flat, the map exhaled creases like old lungs. City zoning map from '83, he said, running a finger along the fold. Annexed land around the ridge. Park included. He tapped the lower quadrant labeled G12. A faint red pencil crosshatch marked the area near Riverbend Park. That's city property, he said. Always has been. HOA maintains the lawn, trims a few hedges, but they don't own dirt one. I bent closer. The boundary lines were hand-drawn, layered over with translucent drafting paper. Brantley pulled that back and revealed the base map beneath, printed in faint blue ink, dated March 1983. That red, he said, pointing. That's my wife's doing. We both worked on the annexation project. She crosshatched everything that had civic utility status. City use only. If the HOA's saying otherwise, they're either lying or stupid. He didn't say which he thought was more likely. I sat on the stool next to his drafting table. So, what now? Brantley leaned over and opened a metal drawer. He pulled out a binder labeled Civic Access. Precedents. Its plastic spine cracked and brittle. From inside, he extracted a copy of a local statute, Tennessee Code Annotated Title 7. I had seen it before. Section 14. The clause about veteran dependents. Brantley slid the paper toward me. If your mom has vet ties, you've got a real case. That clause makes denial illegal. HOA's got no leg to stand on once that's invoked. But the trick is, you need records. Clear ones. He walked over to a smaller drawer and pulled out a yellow envelope. Property records, zoning approvals, maintenance contracts. You find one document showing city ownership, not HOA, and the whole house of cards falls. I nodded slowly. He tilted his head. They count on people not digging, on forgetting. And let's be honest, most folks don't remember what was decided 4 decades ago. He pointed at the map again. The corner of section G12 was smudged a faint fingerprint trapped in waxy pencil. Lucky for them, Brantley said, we remember. He rolled the map carefully and slid it back into its tube. Then he walked to the wall where the tools hung, touched the shears with the her label gently just once, and returned to his bench without comment. I stood. Mind if I scan the statute and the map corner? He nodded. Take photos, too. Just be sure the red lines show. Outside, the afternoon sun hit the windshield of my car and scattered shadows across the dash. I drove home with the window-cracked air cool enough to carry a trace of honeysuckle. It reminded me of something I couldn't quite name. When I got back, Nora Lee was already asleep. Her teacup sat empty beside the recliner. I walked quietly into her bedroom and knelt by the bed. The box was still there, faded blue, with one corner duct-taped where the lid had split years ago. I pulled it out, coughing slightly at the dust. Inside were photographs, black and white, mostly letters from a man I never knew well, and beneath them all, something stiff, laminated, and edged in silver. Dependent ID. U.S. Army, Veteran Family, issued October 1982. Name, Nora Lee A. Riggs, relationship spouse. Status, valid. Her face stared up from the card. Younger, but unmistakably her. Proud chin, eyes that didn't blink for anyone. I held the ID like it might break. The seal was faded, but intact. It wasn't a weapon, but it felt like one. I placed the card on the kitchen table. Nora Lee sat across from it, back straight, hands folded over her lap, eyes not on me, not even on the card, just somewhere beyond the steam that curled from the kettle beneath the yellow glass lamp above us. She didn't move. She didn't need to. The laminated ID, still warm from being scanned, lay between us like a forgotten heirloom. Her name was printed beneath the government seal. Valid. Confirmed. I had double-checked it through the Federal Archive just an hour ago, entered the digits into the Department of Veterans Affairs database, and watched as her status popped up with a green checkmark. Nora Lee A. Riggs. Spouse of Arthur J. Riggs. Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army. Date of issue, 1982. Verification active. Dependent rights applicable. I had expected a surge of satisfaction when I saw the words. What I felt instead was a kind of stillness. The kind that didn't celebrate, it just settled. I sipped my tea, already cooling, and slid the ID across the table an inch closer to her. Still, she didn't touch it. The kettle hissed once more a last breath before falling silent. Somewhere in the other room, the clock clicked from 6:59 to 7:00. I ran it through the registry, I said, voice low. It's valid. Civic Access Clause applies. No response. I reached for my laptop, opened the file I'd prepared, subject line Civic Access Appeal, Riggs Nora Lee. I attached the scan of the ID, a screenshot of Section 14 of the bylaws, and the cropped zoning map Brantley had marked with red pencil. I hovered over the send button. My finger didn't move. Behind me, I heard the soft creak of wood as Nora Lee shifted in her chair. She exhaled through her nose the way she always did before saying something difficult. "You don't have to fight them," she said quietly. Her voice was low but unshaken, like the kind that came after years of deciding not to speak unless it mattered. I looked up. She wasn't challenging me. She wasn't even afraid. It was more tiredness, as if she'd already buried too many battles in the soil of this neighborhood, as if the energy to explain her own right to stand on a piece of public ground wasn't worth summoning anymore. "I'm not fighting," I said. She tilted her head slightly. "I'm reminding them," I added. "That's all." She let out a small breath, neither approval nor objection, and stood slowly. Her chair legs scraped softly against the linoleum. She reached for the kettle, refilled her cup, stirred in a spoonful of honey, and walked toward the back door. She didn't look at the card. She didn't have to. After she left the room, I hit send. The message whooshed away, not with any great triumph, but with the certainty of something that needed to exist now on record with timestamps and attachments they couldn't ignore. I printed a copy of the email, highlighted the key sentence in the Civic Access Clause and the map coordinates, slid it into the folder labeled Park Dispute, which was growing thicker by the day. As I closed the folder, a corner of paper slipped out from between two books on the counter, one of Nora Lee's small prayer books. I picked it up. It was a folded email printout, yellowed slightly, sent from an old AOL address I hadn't seen in years, from my father. Subject: your award. Dinner, you're avoiding it. Date: March 14th, 2006. Nora Lee never wanted credit. She earned it anyway. Nothing more. I stared at the words longer than I meant to, then folded the page and slid it back into place. An hour later, a reply from the HOA appeared in my inbox. Subject: RE, Civic Access Appeal. Riggs, Nora Lee. Body: we acknowledge receipt of your request. The board will review it for internal consistency and determine whether the Civic Access Clause applies to Riverbend Park under our current jurisdiction. Please allow 5 to 7 business days for a decision. Nothing about the zoning map, nothing about the ID, just cold language again built to delay, to buffer, to stall, without rejecting. I read it twice, then marked it with a red sticky note and filed it. At 9:34 p.m., another email came through. No subject line, no text, just an attachment. I clicked it open. A grainy photo time-stamped 3 days earlier. Nora Lee, standing outside the locked park gate, alone. She wasn't facing the camera. Her shoulders were drawn up against the wind. Her hand rested on the iron bar. Behind her, the new sign gleamed white under the sun, almost too bright to see. The image wasn't surveillance. It was intimidation. I didn't show it to her. Not yet. Instead, I printed it, slipped it into a new page protector, and added it to the growing folder. Then, I sat in the dark kitchen, the lamp overhead casting a slow circle of yellow onto the table, and listened to the faint sound of her kettle begin to boil again. The reply came on a Thursday. No greeting. No name. Just a subject line. Response to access review request, and one sentence: insufficient credentials for exception classification. Signed, the board. That was it. No mention of Nora Lee's ID, no reference to Section 14, not even an acknowledgement of the zoning map. Just a flat declaration meant to close the matter like a door quietly locking behind you. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. Then I closed the laptop without replying. Outside, the weather had turned. The air was thick with that early May wait when spring hesitates, unsure whether to bloom or back away. The kind of day where nothing felt certain. I drove to the HOA office not to argue but to look. The building used to be a tool shed. Now it wore a coat of beige vinyl siding and a plastic sign that read Riverbend Estates Administration. The windows were tinted. Inside it smelled like dust filtered through an air purifier someone had forgotten to turn off. I walked over to the bulletin board in the vestibule. It was a patchwork of history and control. Old garage sale flyers, a 2017 note reminding residents to keep pets leashed, 2 pages of parking policy, and pinned dead center newly printed in crisp font General Meeting, May 15th, all residents encouraged to attend. No agenda listed, just the date, time, and location, Rec Room, 6:00 p.m. Beside it was another sheet less formal. Due to ongoing inquiries about access to shared green space, the board is conducting an internal review. Residents are reminded that the park is for verified members only. Exceptions are limited. At the bottom of the sheet in smaller print was a line that most eyes would skip. Exceptions may apply as determined by city code and service affiliation, unbolded, unlinked, but it was there. I took a photo of the notice and stepped outside. That's when I saw Emily. She was folding up a stroller, one hand holding a stack of petitions and flyers. PTA colors, green and white. She waved when she saw me. "Hey, Calder," she said, tucking a clipboard under her arm. "I heard about your mom. I'm sorry." I nodded. "Thanks." "I tried to get approval for a Memorial Day picnic at the park," she added, lowering her voice. "Just something small, folding chairs, music flag ceremony. They denied it, said it could be interpreted as political." I didn't reply, just let the silence hang. Emily bit her lip. "They're not bad people. They just—" She hesitated. "They're afraid of setting a precedent." That word stuck with me all the way to Brantley's. He had the printer warmed up when I arrived. "Knew you'd be back," he said, not looking up. Together we layered the documents. Zoning map G12. Civic exception clause. Nora Lee's scanned ID. We enlarged the code text printed overlays with arrows and labels. I added my father's unit photo from 1967, black and white folded once down the center, still showing the faint outlines of 6 men in uniform standing in front of a barracks door. Sometimes, Brantley said, adjusting the print alignment a straight line is the best argument. I nodded, taping the bottom edge of the ID printout to a stiff backing. "They won't listen," maybe he said, "but they'll see." That night I printed duplicates 4 sets. I punched holes, slid them into plastic sleeves, packed them into a binder. Then I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by paper and coffee rings when Emily knocked. She carried a manila envelope. "I don't know if this helps," she said, holding it out, "but this showed up on my porch yesterday. No note. Inside was a photo. Nora Lee, again sitting on the bench just outside the locked gate, her hands folded neatly in her lap, looking forward, but not at the camera. The picture was grainy, taken from a low angle, probably by phone. Still, her posture was unmistakable. She looked like someone waiting with dignity, not permission. She didn't know. "Someone took this," Emily said softly. I nodded. My throat tightened. I didn't speak. After she left, I added the photo to the binder last page. No caption. No explanation. The next morning, I opened the mailbox and found a single sheet of paper folded 3 times. No envelope, no handwriting, just a sticker, white circular peeled from the back of an ID badge. In the center was Nora Lee's ID number circled in red ink. No message, no context. But it felt like a warning, or a dare. I turned it over. Nothing. Then I slid it between the pages of the binder behind the photo and closed the cover. The folding chairs filled fast. Someone brought a plate of sugar cookies shaped like stars. Another set up a camera near the exit door, not pointed at the speaker's table but angled discreetly toward the room. It was supposed to be a meeting. It felt like a reckoning. I arrived early, binder tucked beneath my arm. Nora Lee came with me but didn't sit beside me. She settled in the back row, coat folded neatly in her lap, eyes forward. She looked like she was waiting for a train that might not come. The community center hall had all the charm of a government waiting room. Fluorescent lights hummed above, flickering in the corners. A slightly askew American flag hung from its bracket near the front podium. The chairs were mismatched metal legs wobbling on the tiled floor. At the front, Sibley Marrow adjusted the microphone stand. Her hair was perfect. Her papers were aligned in color-coded folders. She clicked her pen twice, smiled toward the crowd, then back at no one in particular. Brantley stood quietly to the side, one hand in his pocket, the other resting lightly on the cart that held the overhead projector. He wasn't scheduled to speak. He didn't need to be. The meeting began. Sibley welcomed everyone, thanked them for their attendance, thanked the volunteers who arranged the chairs and printed the agendas. She read aloud from a sheet titled Maintaining Security and Harmony in Shared Spaces. Her voice was clean-clipped clear. Words like liability and consistency echoed off the walls. She referenced access protocols, park usage trends, unified appearance of compliance. It was all so precise, so careful, like she'd practiced in front of a mirror. No one interrupted her. Not yet. When she paused to flip to her next page, I stood. I didn't speak, just walked toward the cart, opened my binder, and pulled out the 3 pages I had placed in clear sleeves the night before. I laid them, one by one, beneath the lens of the projector. First, the zoning map, section G12. The red pencil lines glowed against the white screen behind her. Second, a highlighted printout of Clause 14, Section 2 of the Civic Access Provision. Words in bold, veteran-affiliated dependents shall not be restricted from use of public green space within municipal limits. Third, Nora Lee's laminated ID enlarged to fit the frame. Her name, her husband's name, the department seal. I stepped back. No speech. No finger-pointing. No moralizing. Let them look. Sibley froze for just a moment. Her pen hovered above her notes. Brantley stepped forward, voice steady but low. "I was the city inspector who approved that park boundary back in '83, he said, facing the residents, not the board. "Riverbend maintains it, sure, but they don't own it. Never have." A low murmur passed through the room like wind through leaves. Emily stood. I asked to host a Memorial Day picnic. They denied it, said it might be divisive. People turned toward her, then toward me, then toward the screen. Someone in the second row whispered, "That's Nora Lee, isn't it?" Then a man elderly wearing a faded army ball cap rose with both hands gripping the back of the chair in front of him. He cleared his throat. "Nora Lee," he said, voice gravel-worn, "was the first person to visit our house when my son came home from Vietnam. We didn't even know how to welcome him back. She did. Every grief this neighborhood's had, she's walked it." He looked toward the back row. "She's part of this place, more than any of us." Silence followed. A clean, whole silence, not uncomfortable, not strained. Sibley didn't speak. Her mouth was half-open eyes scanning the papers beneath the projector like they were written in another language. Her fingers tapped her pen once against the podium, then stilled. Behind her, the flag barely moved in the slow draft of the ceiling fan. I turned, looked toward Nora Lee. She stood. Her hands were empty, her shoulders squared. She walked slowly toward the front, not making a sound. She didn't look at Sibley. She didn't look at me. She stopped beside the projector, lifted one hand, and touched the corner of the glass right where her name was projected large behind her. Then she walked out. No words. No nod. Just the soft steps of a woman who had made her point long before anyone in the room had the courage to echo it. The room didn't erupt. There was no shouting, no applause, just a long, collective stillness, as if everyone had been holding their breath without knowing it. Brantley reached forward and turned off the projector. The screen went blank. Sibley gathered her papers with shaking hands. Woe weeks later, the lock on the park gate was gone. No announcement. No ceremony. Just gone. The chain that once looped tight through the iron handles now hung loose at the side like someone had remembered it didn't belong and quietly corrected the mistake. The new sign, HOA members only, was still there but slightly tilted now, the screws beginning to rust in the May humidity. Kids were back, chasing each other between the swings. A chalk drawing of a turtle curled halfway around the bench nearest the drinking fountain. The hedge had been trimmed too close in some places, but at least someone tried. Nora Lee didn't say anything the first time we passed the open gate. She just looked at it, then kept walking. We made it halfway around the path before I asked if she wanted to sit. She shook her head. Not today. That afternoon, Emily stopped by with a folded flyer in her hand. "It's approved," she said, eyes shining. "Memorial Day, yup. Music, photos, speech if anyone wants, but mostly just neighbors being together. No permits, no security review. Just people." She paused. "Thanks, Calder. You cleared the way. I didn't open anything I said. I just reminded them it was already open." Later, I met Brantley at Bell's Cafe, the place with stiff stools and burnt coffee that somehow tasted better because of it. He set down a small box across from me. "Found this in my garage," he said, lifting the lid. Inside was a tarnished silver pin shaped like a maple leaf with the year 1983 etched at the stem. "City gave these out when we opened that park. Everyone on the project team got one. It's nothing, really." He pushed it toward me. "Keep it," he said. I ran my thumb along the grooves. The metal was smooth with time. "Did they mean it back then?" I asked. "The idea of a shared place." Brantley smiled. "They meant it. They just didn't write it in bold. When I got home, I sat at my desk and opened a fresh document on my laptop. To whom it may concern, I typed, then deleted it. I started again this time as myself. I wrote a full account of what had happened, dates, images, clauses, voices. I attached the zoning map, the civic exception printout, Nora Lee's ID. I ended with the request that the letter be added to the public record under city correspondence. I signed it simply, Calder, Riggs, Riverbend Estates. I didn't hit send right away. I looked out the window instead. Nora Lee sat on the porch, a basket of yarn in her lap. Her fingers moved steadily, looping and pulling the pale blue thread into a growing rectangle. No pattern, no rush. Just the quiet rhythm of a woman who'd done more with silence than most do with speeches. Neighbors passed. Some nodded. One offered a hesitant wave. She didn't wave back, just lifted her chin a little in recognition. She never needed the spotlight. That wasn't the point. I stepped outside and sat beside her. For a while we listened to the kids down the block, to the birds above, to the soft creak of the porch swing in the breeze. Then she said, without looking at me, "I don't need a name on the bench." I turned to her. "Let them sit," she said. "That's all I ever wanted." I nodded. It was enough. That evening I checked the mailbox. Bills, flyers, and one small envelope without a return address. Inside was a single folded note, typed, unsigned. "You were right. I just didn't want to be forgotten." I read it twice. Then I slid it into the back of the binder where the photo of Nora Lee still lived, her seated outside, the gate, hands folded. That page didn't need an explanation anymore. Neither did this. 6 months later, the bench sits beneath a willow tree near the east side of Riverbend Park. The lavender bushes we planted around it have taken root. The blossoms lean slightly toward the low afternoon sun, violet and gray-green against the amber leaves. No plaques, no titles, just stone shadow and silence. The inscription on the bench is carved small flush with the grain of the wood slat beneath the seat for those who remembered. It wasn't my phrase. Brantley found it on a note card buried in his late wife's old files, a proposed slogan for the park's original dedication. It had been rejected, he said, for being too vague. But vague is what makes it last. That morning I brought 2 more lavender plants in the back of the truck, their roots wrapped in burlap dirt still clinging to them from Emily's garden. I planted one on either side of the bench while Nora Lee watched. She didn't offer to help. She didn't need to. She wore Dad's old field jacket, zipped up halfway collar, folded neatly. Her hands rested atop her cane, fingers laced knuckles soft with time. The breeze picked at the edges of her scarf. She hadn't said much on the drive over, just hummed the first few notes of an old church song, then stopped mid-phrase. I didn't ask her to finish. Behind us, somewhere along the gravel path, kids laughed. The faint thump of a basketball. Someone's dog barking twice, then quiet again. A young woman passed by with her son, maybe 6 or 7. He paused in front of the bench, head tilted. "Mom," he asked, pointing at the carving. Who were they? The woman smiled. People who helped. He thought about that for a second, then walked over, climbed onto the bench, and sat. Not swinging his legs, not fidgeting, just sitting. Nora Lee watched him. Didn't smile, didn't cry, but I saw her fingers move just once, tightening around the cane before letting go. The mother nodded to us and moved on her son, still seated, lost in his own little silence. We waited, let the sun settle lower behind the willow. The shadows grew long and thin across the grass. Eventually, the boy slid off the bench and ran to catch up. Nora Lee leaned forward slightly. "Do you think he understood?" "No," I said, "but maybe someday he'll remember sitting there." We started walking back, past the swings, past the path where Nora Lee's photo was once taken, locked out, hands folded. Now she passed through the gate without hesitation. No one watched. No one stopped her. By the community center, the bulletin board still stood. The cork was bleached pale from summer sun. No new flyers, no warnings about hedges or paint color, no agenda notices, just an empty board waiting for someone to think of something worth pinning. I stood there for a moment, not because I needed to, just to see it blank. Brantley had called me last week. Said he was thinking of writing a book, not a tell-all, just a collection of stories about public spaces, how they can include or exclude without ever speaking a word. I told him I'd read it. Emily was putting together a photo collage for the memorial event. She asked if she could use the old zoning map as a background. I said yes. She laughed, said, "Only you would think paperwork could be sentimental. Maybe she's right." Nora Lee and I reached the truck. She paused before getting in, looked back at the bench. The wind had stirred the lavender into soft motion. Then she said, "I'm glad it doesn't have my name on it." I didn't answer. I just opened the door for her, and we headed home. That fall I passed the bench again, lavender still blooming, the wood dry but whole. The air had a quiet weight, the kind that comes after a storm has moved through and left the leaves shinier than before. We spend so much time locking things, gates, documents, even stories we don't want retold. But sometimes what heals us isn't justice in a headline. It's the chance to sit down without asking and know we still belong. Sometimes bridges collapse so we can learn which ones are worth rebuilding. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? If it has, I'd be honored to hear your story. Leave a comment or stay a while and listen to the others.